Artemis II is about to put human beings through something no one in history has ever experienced. For more than 53 years, not a single human left low Earth orbit. Not once. It was the longest gap in deep space exploration since humanity first learned how to explore beyond its own atmosphere. That gap ended just 4 days ago, when a rocket carrying 4 astronauts tore through the Florida sky and set its course for the moon. Artemis II is not Apollo repeated. It is not a sequel. The crew flying right now, Reed Wiseman, Victor Glover, Christina Koch, and Jeremy Hansen, are doing things inside that spacecraft that Apollo astronauts could never have imagined. And some of what they are experiencing would have looked like pure science fiction to the engineers of 1972. So what changed over half a century? Almost everything. Start with the spacecraft itself. The Apollo Command Module gave its 3-person crew about 210 cubic feet of habitable space. That is roughly the inside volume of a large closet. 3 grown men sealed inside a closet for up to 14 days. Orion gives its 4-person crew 330 cubic feet, nearly 60% more room. That is about the space of 2 minivans parked side by side with the seats removed. It is still cramped, still claustrophobic by any normal standard. But the difference between a closet and 2 stripped-out minivans matters when you are 250,000 miles from the nearest hospital and you have not stretched your legs in a week. That extra space is not only about comfort, it changes what the crew can physically do. Orion has a dedicated hygiene bay with doors that actually close. There is a toilet, the Universal Waste Management System, nearly identical to the one used on the International Space Station. It collects urine and feces separately, processes them, and does it with something Apollo astronauts never had: privacy. Apollo crews used plastic bags, adhesive bags taped to their bodies, used in front of one another, then sealed and stored inside the cabin with them for the rest of the mission. Nearly every Apollo astronaut who later spoke honestly about that experience described it as one of the worst parts of spaceflight. The Artemis II crew will never have to endure that particular humiliation, and honestly, that alone might have been worth the 53-year wait. Then there is exercise. Apollo astronauts did not exercise in space. There was no room, no equipment, and on missions shorter than 2 weeks, NASA decided the muscle and bone loss was acceptable. The Artemis II crew exercises every day except launch and landing days, 30 minutes each day, using a device called a flywheel. It weighs about 30 pounds and fits into a space roughly the size of a carry-on suitcase. It works almost like a yo-yo, a cable-based resistance system that gives back force in proportion to how hard you pull, up to 400 pounds. You can row with it. You can squat with it. You can deadlift with it. For comparison, the exercise equipment on the International Space Station weighs more than 4,000 pounds and takes up around 850 cubic feet. The flywheel can do a surprising amount of the same job at a tiny fraction of the mass and size. Apollo had nothing like that. Those crews often came home weak. Some could barely stand. The Artemis II crew will return having done deadlifts in 0 gravity on the way to the moon, a sentence that would have sounded absurd to almost anyone alive during the Apollo era. The rocket that sent them there is different too. Apollo rode the Saturn V, the most powerful rocket ever flown at the time, producing 7.5 million pounds of thrust at liftoff. The Space Launch System that sent Artemis II into space on April 1st produces 8.8 million pounds, about 17% more. Both rockets are expendable, meaning they fly once and are gone forever, which feels almost old-fashioned in an age when SpaceX lands boosters on drone ships. But SLS was not built to be cheap. It was built to hurl Orion and its crew toward the moon in a single launch. No orbital assembly, no refueling, no docking needed just to leave Earth's neighborhood. Saturn V did the same thing. The difference is what sits on top. Apollo was powered entirely by fuel cells and batteries. Hydrogen and oxygen combined to generate electricity and, as a useful byproduct, drinking water. It was elegant but limited. Every watt the crew used came from a tank that was slowly running dry. Orion unfolds 4 solar array wings once it reaches space. Each one is covered with photovoltaic cells that turn sunlight into electricity. Its power supply is, for all practical purposes, unlimited as long as the sun is shining. That changes the psychology of the mission in a subtle but important way. Apollo crews were always managing consumables, always aware that the clock was ticking down on oxygen, power, and water. Orion's crew still has to manage consumables. Oxygen and water do not come from solar panels. but the electrical margin is fundamentally different. The spacecraft systems can run longer, harder, and with more redundancy because the power source effectively regenerates itself. And the service module, the part of the spacecraft responsible for propulsion, thermal control, and life support, was not even built in the United States. It was built by Airbus Defence and Space in Europe and provided through the European Space Agency. Apollo was American down to the rivets. Artemis is international by design. A Canadian astronaut is on this mission because of a treaty signed in 2020. European hardware is helping keep the crew alive. The next phase of the program includes the Lunar Gateway, a space station that will orbit the moon with modules supplied by multiple countries and agencies. The era of one nation going to the moon alone ended when Apollo ended. What came after is messier, slower, and more complex. But it also means the cost, the knowledge, and the risk are shared. Now look beneath the panels. Orion's flight computers are about 20,000 times faster than Apollo's. 20,000. Apollo's guidance computer had about 72 kilobytes of memory in total and could process around 40,000 instructions per second. A modern smartphone makes it look primitive. Orion runs 4 independent computers in parallel. Each is around 25 times faster than the computers used on the International Space Station and about 400 times faster than those on the Space Shuttle. The cockpit is fully digital. Glass displays, software interfaces, real-time trajectory updates. Apollo's cockpit was a world of analog switches, dials, and physical gauges. Astronauts had to read instruments manually, while ground control handled most of the complicated calculations. Orion can, in theory, fly itself. It proved that during Artemis I in 2022, when the uncrewed spacecraft completed a full lunar mission and returned to Earth autonomously. That matters more than it sounds. Apollo astronauts were, in many meaningful ways, passengers inside a vehicle that depended heavily on ground control to function. Mission Control in Houston made most of the crucial decisions. Orion changes that balance. The Artemis II crew has been performing manual piloting demonstrations in deep space, physically flying the spacecraft and testing how it responds under different steering modes, evaluating how the vehicle behaves when a human is actively in command. Apollo astronauts did fly manually during certain phases, docking and landing especially, but they never flew the command module through open space the way Wiseman and Hansen just did. This spacecraft is being built for a future where astronauts may need to operate independently far from Earth, where even a few seconds of delay to the moon, or up to 20 minutes to Mars, would make ground control useless in an emergency. Speaking of communication, Apollo talked to Houston using radio waves, the same basic technology as AM radio, just pointed at the moon. It worked, but the audio was scratchy, bandwidth was limited, and sending even one photograph could take minutes. Orion still has radio as a backup, but its primary high bandwidth system uses something Apollo never had: laser communication. The Orion Artemis II optical communication system uses infrared light to transmit data back to Earth at rates that would have been unimaginable during Apollo. By the 4th day of the mission, the system had already downlinked 100 gigabytes of data, including high-resolution photos the crew had taken through Orion's windows. Apollo's total data return from an entire mission was measured in megabytes. The Artemis II crew is sending high-resolution imagery from deep space in something close to real time. When Christina Koch looked back at Earth through Orion's window and that image appeared on screens around the world within hours, that was laser communication doing something radio never could. The views are different too. Every Apollo mission that reached the moon flew roughly 70 miles above the lunar surface, close enough to see individual craters and watch the line between day and night crawl across the terrain below. Artemis II will not get that close. At its nearest point during the flyby, Orion will be about 4,600 miles above the moon's surface. That creates a completely different visual experience. Instead of skimming over the terrain and seeing only a narrow strip at a time, the Artemis II crew will see the entire disk of the moon all at once, pole to pole, filling their windows. No Apollo astronaut ever had that view at closest approach, and because of the geometry of this mission and the timing of the launch, the crew will see something no human has ever seen with their own eyes: the Orientala Basin. It lies on the boundary between the moon's near side and far side, a gigantic impact basin roughly 600 miles across. Robotic spacecraft have photographed it, instruments in orbit have mapped it, but no human being has ever directly looked at it. Apollo missions were timed so the near side was illuminated during their flybys, which meant the Orientale region was either in darkness or out of sight. Artemis II changes that. NASA confirmed that the crew has already photographed it through Orion's windows. For the first time in history, a human being looked at a feature on the moon and saw something only machines had seen before. There is also a solar eclipse coming, not the kind seen from Earth, where the moon blocks the sun. This one happens when the Earth blocks the sun, as seen from the spacecraft's position behind the moon. It will last about 53 minutes and occur around an hour after Earthrise. No Apollo crew ever witnessed anything like it. The geometry never lined up. Artemis II was not specifically designed to create this eclipse, but the physics of its trajectory made it unavoidable, and now the crew and science teams on the ground are treating it as a bonus scientific opportunity. Imagine watching your home planet, a thin blue crescent, slowly move in front of the sun while you drift behind the moon in the deepest silence any human has ever known. Reed Wiseman described the views so far as something no amount of training could have prepared him for. He said you could see the entire globe from pole to pole, Africa, Europe, and if you looked carefully, even the northern lights. And that was only from partway through the transit. The flyby views will be on another level. The mission will also set a new record for the farthest distance any human has ever traveled from Earth. That record is currently held by the Apollo 13 crew, not because they planned it that way, but because disaster forced them onto a free return trajectory after the oxygen tank explosion. They reached 248,655 miles from Earth. Artemis II is expected to reach approximately 252,757 miles. That is about 4,100 miles farther. That may not sound like much compared with 250,000 miles, but symbolically it matters. Apollo 13 set that record because something went terribly wrong, and the crew had to survive a desperate slingshot around the moon in a crippled spacecraft. Artemis II will break that record because it was designed to. The free return trajectory that brought Apollo 13 home as an emergency measure is Artemis II's main flight plan from the beginning. What was once a backup is now the architecture. And at the end of it all, the Artemis II crew will face something no human has ever survived at this speed: re-entry. When Orion hits Earth's atmosphere on the way home, it will be moving at roughly 25,000 miles per hour. That is faster than any crewed spacecraft has ever traveled during re-entry. Faster than Apollo, faster than the shuttle, faster than anything before it. Its heat shield will endure temperatures approaching 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit, as superheated plasma engulfs the vehicle and cuts off all communication. For those minutes, the crew will be completely alone. No talking to Houston, no outside help, nothing to do except trust the engineering, and that heat shield carries its own history into this mission. After Artemis I returned in 2022, engineers found unexpected erosion in the ablative material. Parts of the heat shield charred and flaked in ways the models had not predicted. The underlying structure held. Internal temperatures stayed within limits. But the damage raised serious enough concerns that NASA assembled an independent review team and spent years analyzing whether the shield was safe for a crewed mission. Some engineers objected. Some wanted a redesigned shield before anyone flew on top of it. NASA Administrator Jared Isaacman reviewed the data, met with engineers and outside experts, and gave the go-ahead. The shield flying on Artemis II is essentially the same design, with the understanding that changes are planned for Artemis III. The crew knows that. They accepted the risk. Every astronaut who has ever flown has accepted some version of that same bargain. The recognition that engineering is never perfect, that safety margins are real but not infinite, and that exploration sometimes means going anyway. The crew itself represents something Apollo never did. Victor Glover is the first person of color to travel beyond low Earth orbit. Christina Koch is the first woman. Jeremy Hansen is the first non-American citizen to do it. Hansen is Canadian, selected through a 2020 agreement between the United States and Canada that formalized Canadian involvement in the Artemis program. Apollo was entirely American, entirely white, and entirely male. Not because NASA openly declared it had to be that way, but because the pipeline that produced military test pilots in the 1960s was exclusionary by design. Artemis II does not erase that history. Nothing can. But it does mean that the first humans to see the moon up close in more than 50 years look more like the species they represent. There is also a quieter experiment happening inside the cabin that Apollo never attempted. The crew is being monitored for the biological effects of deep space radiation in ways that go far beyond anything Apollo tracked. radiation dosimeters, sleep pattern monitoring, cardiovascular data. All of it is being recorded to understand what 10 days outside Earth's protective magnetic field does to the human body. In low Earth orbit, that magnetic field deflects most dangerous charged particles from deep space, trapping many of them in concentrated zones known as the Van Allen belts. The International Space Station orbits safely below those belts. Every crewed mission since Apollo 17 has stayed below them. The Artemis II crew passed through both belts on the way out and will pass through them again on the way home, exposing themselves to the very radiation those belts help concentrate. Apollo astronauts did the same thing, but the medical monitoring back then was primitive by comparison. Some Apollo astronauts reported seeing flashes of light even with their eyes closed, cosmic rays striking their retinas. Now we understand much more about what causes those flashes. We know the risks are real. We know they are cumulative. The data from this mission will shape crew selection, mission duration limits, and deep space mission design for decades. 4 people are in deep space right now. That is the most humans ever to be in deep space at the same time in the history of our species. Apollo never sent more than 3 beyond low Earth orbit on a single mission. Artemis II has 4. They are eating rehydrated meals warmed in a heater about the size of a briefcase. They are sleeping in bags strapped to the walls of a cabin not much larger than a walk-in closet. They are exercising on a 30-pound yo-yo. They have already seen parts of the moon that no one alive has ever seen. And by tomorrow, they will have traveled farther from Earth than any human being before them. And they are doing it all in a spacecraft that, if we are honest, is still a capsule. A bigger capsule than Apollo, a smarter capsule. Better equipped, better connected, better in almost every measurable way. But still a capsule. Still a metal shell with a heat shield underneath and parachutes above, built to keep 4 human beings alive in the most hostile environment we have ever entered. The fundamental engineering problem has not changed since 1968. You still need air, water, food, thermal control, radiation protection, a way to slow down, and a way to survive the landing. 53 years of technological progress have made all of those systems lighter, faster, more reliable, and more capable. They have not made any of them easy. The Artemis II crew will splash down in the Pacific Ocean sometime around April 11th. Recovery ships will be waiting. Airbags will inflate around the capsule to flip it upright if it lands sideways or upside down, another feature Apollo did not have. Divers will approach the bobbing spacecraft, open the hatch, and help 4 people climb out into the sunlight. Those 4 people will have completed the first crewed mission beyond Earth orbit in more than half a century. They will have tested every system future crews will rely on to eventually land on the moon. They will have seen things that permanently change how they understand their planet, their own smallness, and their own luck at being alive on the one rock in the solar system where you can step outside and breathe. When Apollo astronauts returned, they came back as conquerors. The moon had been the target, and they reached it. When the Artemis II crew comes home, they will return as pathfinders. The moon is no longer the final destination. It is the first stop. Everything this crew is testing, life support, navigation, the heat shield, communications, exercise hardware, even the toilet, all of it is being validated not just for lunar missions, but for what comes after. Mars. Orion has already been evaluated for a 1,000-day mission profile when paired with additional habitation modules. The data Artemis II is collecting right now, including how the crew's bodies respond to deep space radiation, how they sleep, and how their cardiovascular systems adapt, will directly shape the spacecraft and mission plans that send the first humans to another planet. Apollo proved that we could leave. Artemis is figuring out how to stay gone. Right now, as you are hearing this, 4 human beings are closer to the moon than anyone has been since December 1972. They are looking through windows bigger and clearer than anything Apollo ever offered. They are transmitting images home at speeds that make Apollo's radio look like smoke signals. They are flying a spacecraft that can think for itself, built with 3D printed parts and powered by sunlight, carrying with it the lessons of 53 years of trial and error. Lessons paid for with failure, patience, money, and time. They are not repeating Apollo. They are picking up a thread that was dropped in 1972, pulling it forward and weaving something new. And tomorrow, they will pass behind the moon for 40 minutes. No signal will reach them, no voice from Earth, no data link, no connection to anything human except the 3 other people floating beside them inside a capsule 250,000 miles from home. The Apollo astronauts knew that silence too. It is the one part of the experience that has not changed. The moon still blocks the signal, the void is still the void, and for those 40 minutes, the Artemis II crew will understand something no amount of technology can soften or translate: the ancient, irreducible reality of being alone in the dark, farther from home than any road, wire, or beam of light can follow. That silence is the same. Everything else is new. If you enjoy this kind of deep space storytelling, subscribe to Zilloom, leave a comment with your thoughts, and stay with the channel for more videos like this.